It's the top of the hour, and this is Two on One, the internet's #1 talk show where theologians grapple with pop culture and pop culturalists grapple with theology. If this is all happening, it means I'm your co-host, the Reverend Arthur Stewart.
And I am your other co-host, the Reverend Stephanie Kendall. And Arthur, it is so good to be back.
It is so good to be back. We don't know if you figured it out, dear deuces, but we actually pre-recorded the month of July. That's why, my beard didn't grow and Spiff's hair magically changed. But if you're listening to the podcast, you had no idea. I shouldn't have said anything.
Oh, our deuces, our listening deuces have been duped.
Duped Deuces is my favorite new card game from Mattel. Hey,
the band will start later.
It is so good to see you. I've really missed you. I know we talk about how we're I think you said to our guest today, you and I are digitally inseparable.
We are. Like that. Me too. I missed you.
I missed you too. But what'd you do on your summer vacation, Spiff?
Well, my church does sabbatical for each of its pastors yearly. We get a month.
Wow.
And I think it's a model of sabbatical that's really, it's not for everybody, but it's really useful for our community in which, you know me, I work a lot and I love my job, but I work hard. And so and I also don't rest well. I'm not one that I don't take my Sabbaths well. And so this kind of forced yearly sabbatical where we each get a month off to rest and renew is just a really cool thing that my church does for us. As those of us that we do a lot of protesting and a lot of our ministry is both inside and outside in the street or, 24 hours a day during COVID. So, but I got to go home to California again before all this Delta variant kind of took off. So I got to see my niece who turned 4 and is magical. And what did you do? What was your Christmas? What did you get for Christmas in July, Arthur?
I went to Delaware and I saw nephews and my sister, and I ate a lot of seafood, and I got beaten up by the ocean, and I had an experience which I'm calling secular prayer.
Ooh.
Figuring out how to work that into my doctoral program, which carries forth. You're getting way ahead of me in your doctoral work, but I'm going to catch up.
It's not a race. It is. We all do it at our time. And also I'm a 3. So yes, I am winning.
Yeah. And I'm 7. So as long as I'm having fun, I don't really care.
Totally. But yeah, I am at Drew doing a women in religious leadership cohort. And we are finishing our coursework this week for the preparing for a year and a half of thesis writing. And then it'll be Rev Dr. Spiff.
I've seen some of the books, and this is a total aside, and we really got to get to our program.
We really do.
But I want to talk to you about some of those Corinthian books when you're done, because I don't know if you know this. I've been studying the Corinthians for a while here. So anyways, do you know what season it is right now, Spiff? It's ordination season.
It is indeed. And we want to pause and celebrate all the folks who have said yes to their distinct call by God in their lives, and the congregations who have also said yes to the authorization of these calls.
So part of ordination in our tradition, the disciples, is signs of office. There's patens and chalices, and there's pitchers and basins.
There's a ministerial code of ethics, words of commendation from regions in your divinity schools or seminaries.
And robes, and of course,
stoles.
So
let's take a moment to pause and celebrate to the marvelous, truly beautiful liturgical textiles from our lead sponsor, Jeff One-Row Designs.
If you're looking for the perfect ordination gift for the newly official minister in your life, Jeff One-Row Designs is your best option.
For over 16 years, Jeff One-Row has been making ordinary time extraordinary time by designing and handcrafting banners and paraments and frontals, and of course, stoles of all varieties for all denominations and theological persuasions.
And I don't know about you, Spiff, but when I do ecumenical work out on the streets, I oftentimes wear a stole as a mark of the office. And even the zero tradition folks I encounter are a little jealous, a little covetous of that great stole.
Yeah, I have a quick little story about that. So a couple of years ago, so I run a thing called Beloved and Proud, which is a gathering of different faith leaders from around New York City. And so for Pride, a couple years ago, we Beloved and Proud marched in New York City Pride. And there was a moment where, and we had like 50 people like RSVP, and we were like so excited. Arthur, we had like 400 people show up. It was wild. It was so fun and so joyous. We took up 2 full city blocks of the parade. And at one point, we all took a knee to remember those who we have lost due to the various systems of oppression that face the queer community and the Black community and the Indigenous community, just all the oppressive structures of this world. And anyways, so there was a couple behind me, and I was in a collar, but not in my stole. Like I was just, it was hot. It's June in New York, and they were just kind of talking to each other, and I overheard a little bit, and they were supposed to get married that day and had signed up. There's a church in New York City that apparently was doing like 15-minute weddings where you could just sign up. And so they signed up, and these 2 men, one of them has a name that has been socially constructed to be understood as a feminine name. And so this church did not think anything about it when they had signed up and all the things. And they got there, and as 2 men, they were turned away. And they were just kind of really excited to walk with us and kind of have some of that pride built back into their spaces. But we're sad. And so I turned around and I was like, do you want to get married? Do you have your marriage license? And they're like, yeah, we do. Like we were all ready. And they're telling me the story, not recognizing, again, because as a woman, we are often overlooked as faith leaders, ordained faith leaders. And so I was like, do you want to get married right now? And he was like, yeah. And so I married them in the middle of our entire contingency. And what I did though, was I had a backpack and I pulled out my stole and I put it on to officiate this very quick middle of Pride ceremony wedding. And I did not have my Jeff Wunrow stole on because I just got my Jeff Wunrow stole, as our deuces know. But it reminds me of the weight and the power and the authority and the love that comes with these types of just beautifully crafted stoles from Jeff.
It is the yoke of Christ. I once had a Quaker call it a fancy worship scarf.
Oh, I love that.
I love that. It was my rainbow crane stole, incidentally.
That is a fancy scarf.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are looking for an exquisite quality piece of liturgical art that you can use and wear, head on over to jeffwunrow.com. That is JEFFWUNROW.com for a full catalog and customization options.
When you wear a fancy worship scarf, make sure it's the best. And those fancy worship scarves are from Jeff Wunrow.
Absolutely. And just a reminder that our deuces have a special code just for you. It is the best code that is available for Jeff stoles right now. And it is 2 on 1. You use it at checkout. And you know where if you forget that code, do you know where you can see it, Arthur?
On our website?
On our website. But where is also our website this Saturday?
Oh, it's at Disciples Virtual Gathering.
It is at Disciples Virtual Gathering. Come on over to the virtual, to Disciples Virtual Gathering. Go to disciples.org, and you can see me all day long. You can see the content over at the 2 on 1 booth in our virtual or our gathering hall. And so make sure you do that, disciples and non-disciples, people that just want to show up.
It'll happen. But make sure you show up to jeffwunrow.com. And thanks again, Jeff, for being just the best dang sponsor a talk show could ever want.
Jeff will be there too. Jeff's coming to Virtual Gathering too. So
awesome. It's the best. Simply the best. And you know what? I've had the time of my life, Spiff.
I was going to make the same joke.
And I would like to owe it all to our guest. Very patient.
At the time of my life.
Dana, welcome.
Oh,
you're sideways.
Spiff. Oh, there we go. Is it? Oh, awesome. Spiff, that was a beautiful rendition. I mean, why didn't they hire you for the soundtrack? Is what I'm dying to know.
Probably because I was 4 when it came out, but that would not have stopped me. The 4-year-old precocious Stephanie, who went on to my undergrad is in vocal performance and musical theater, would have loved that because Dana, I did not know that I needed this episode.
Oh, that is music to my ears.
Before we get into it, tell us who you are. Tell us your projects, your passion, your purpose, your poise.
Oh, you're so kind. I'm Dana. I am a professor of world religions and critical thinking at Wake Tech Community College in Raleigh, North Carolina. Ooh. I'm also an author of 4 books, the latest of which is Dessert First, preparing for death while savoring life. And so, we've done a lot of preparing for life and death this year. And so it's a very pertinent work that I had no idea would be so pertinent in the era of COVID and beyond. And I'm also, first and foremost, above teaching and ministering and writing, I'm a dirty dancing enthusiast, like hardcore. Number one. That should have I should have led with that. I mean, that's my favorite line in my bio.
When
So
you go
there
to
you
your
have it.
website, it's like that's all it is, right? It's just like pictures, it's just videos of you dirty dancing.
Right, exactly.
I do,
Totally.
I do know, for those of you who are listening on the podcast, Dana Trent is in a corner right now.
I am oh my gosh, Arthur, you're totally right.
You
Oh,
put yourself in a corner
Who
too.
what
put
am
you
I
there? Yes.
doing? It's Enneagram 2. It's like we look for the lowest space in the room where we can like hover and help other people. So
I
yeah.
assumed you were a 7 just for a moment because of dessert first, but I get it.
I'll
Okay,
take
so
it.
today's topic is the 1980s masterpiece, Dirty Dancing. For those of you who have not seen Dirty Dancing, I do want to note it's 99 cents on a certain streaming service that just sent its evil megalomaniacal billionaire owner into space. Take that hint as you wish. Dirty Dancing is...
And go to Apple.
Yep. Dirty Dancing is set in
Oh.
the 1960s at a resort in the Northeast, wherein dancing is a metaphor for a lot of things. So Dana, why do you love Dirty Dancing so much?
Oh, and every time I watch it, and Spiff, I know that you've seen Rent like 40 times. Is that right?
It is.
So
yeah.
I'm probably up there, maybe like times 10, right? So it's dirty. Like every time I watch it, you probably feel this way about Rent. You see something new, right? And so as I'm watching it, in light of 2020 and thinking about George Floyd and injustices and privilege, and racism and classism, like my eyes are open to all the mega themes of this movie about classism, about judgment, about, privilege and who has it and who doesn't, and how are we going to tell that in storytelling. And so that's what I love the most about this movie. It's of course fun, but it's also very poignant, and I've got a copy of the script. And so if you just read the script too, that comes across more vividly than the dancing, right? Because we're also enthralled with Patrick and, who isn't, right? So, but when you read the words, when you read Eleanor Bergstein's words, you realize like how far ahead of the curve she was, both in her adolescence, but also like how this movie speaks to us now in our current time.
So,
yeah.
Forgive me.
I mean, that's exactly what I put on my, I watched it again last night, and I will admit that I watched it for the first time, I think more as like an adult, definitely more in like my womanist feminist field that I'm in now, like for the first time in a really long time. And I was like, I'm sorry, why is this not like the magnum opus for like feminists? Like
Totally.
It is so pertinent to what is happening today in our courts and today in our world. That it was written in the 80s and it's set in the 60s, and I was like,
it's kind of set in the 60s. Like it's vaguely set in
it's sure
right. Mm-hmm.
But she's I mean the first thing you know about her is that she's got these of babies that she's, and which is also a juxtaposition of the name baby, right? Like that's an entire thing. And then but she's going into the Peace Corps, and she's just like right. She's like, it's before Kennedy, but after the, you're just like, oh, like she sets a stage for this kind of empowerment that you already understand, like right off the bat, is so important for our young people today, to know that like, no matter what is coming at you, like you've got what you need. And I think that I'm going to come out and say this because I wrote it as a note to myself. This movie is about falling in love with yourself, in a way that we need right now. That isn't about individualism, but is about who you were created to be in community and in your wholeness.
Yes. Oh my goodness, that's beautifully said. Falling in love with yourself. And when you do that, when baby is who she says she is, Johnny says to her, you're not afraid to, tell the world who you are and stand up for other people, especially when it's going to cost you something. Yeah. And so, I mean, what greater like call do we have to tikkun olam and repairing the world, as we get into like the theological themes of this too. But first and foremost, you're exactly right. I mean, this is about identity. It's about social constructs, and it speaks, you're right, to young people today, which gives me an idea. I think maybe I'll have to figure out a religious angle to play this in class this semester. So you all are getting my wheels turning for this too. So thank you.
Well, it's the golden rule. It is
the golden rule.
I mean, baby sacrifices her relationship with her father. And I think when she's talking to her sister towards the end of the movie, when they're both, you're no longer daddy's girl, he now listens to what I have to say. First, it breaks my heart for the idiot sister, who is perfectly played. As somebody who's just bad at dancing and did a lot of theater, people have to know how to dance that poorly. And her robotic hooling was amazing. Anyways,
I literally wrote a note and I was like, is the sister hula scene the most problematic scene of this movie, with the exception of like there aren't a lot of people of color, right? Like it's not actually it's very white.
There's the black couple that dances in the background.
Oh, for sure. I mean,
there is.
Guy whose last name is Hernandez or Gutierrez, or
I think you're right. And then there's Tito, who is the gentleman at the end with Max, and they're and what's cool about that relationship with Tito and Max is that they're going through the history of the resort together and what they've endured. We've lived through the Great Depression, we've lived through the war, remember this. Oh, the kids don't want to come here now, they want to go to Europe, 31 countries in 4 days. And so they're bemoaning this idea. So there's some gifts of friendship. But going back to Lisa is perfectly played. She decorates the world. She feels pretty. She's got her own version of dancing. She's got this problematic, boy figure. We're going to call him a man child in this movie, who's her love interest. And, she's sort of, we all would love to be baby, and have this deep, like, ethical tethering to our values. But in reality, I would say that most of the time I'll walk around the world as Lisa, right? Just kind of,
my friend
just
Christine,
superficial.
This really good sermon where she talked about the fact that when we see stories, we want to cast ourselves as the heroes, but we need to be able to step back and see where sometimes we are the Lisas. Like we are. Anyways, Spiff, you had a question and I kind of jumped in and we derailed, and I beg your pardon.
No, you're good. We can already tell that this episode is off to like high energy because we're all like, y'all, we gotta talk about this. And it's, but I just, maybe because I'm in a women's religious leadership cohort. It is a cohort. For the first time in my life, I was in a class of all women taught by a woman. And I did not realize how much that affected. I did not realize how much the male gaze affected my learning style, especially as a 3 who was performative in lots of different ways. Taking that off completely allowed me to understand my true learning style and how I learn best. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And so I'm watching this and I'm like, oh my gosh. And her name, like, what is your name, baby? What is your real name, baby? I thought was so good, was so moving, because what is the true name? Who are we at our core, right? And because the world sees us as baby. And the amount of times that as a woman, I am called baby or darling or anything but pastor, or whatever, or where's your husband? Well, I'm single, like all the things that are put onto us. And yet some of it is, it's a reclaim. She's fine with being called baby because that is also a part of who she is. Holding that in juxtaposition, I thought was really beautifully done. But I wonder, at the, there's that line at the end that Johnny with the dad, which, I mean, rest in peace, Jerry Orbach. So the whole thing is cast so well. But, it's like, oh, that is who you would see, right? Johnny comes out and it's like Jerry makes that real, or the dad makes a real judgmental call. And I wonder who we hope, what is the church trying to tell us about who it really is and who we think it is? Like what do we see what are we projecting on the church, and what do we see as the church, but what is the church in its action telling us who it is?
Oh, that's a great question. That is a great question. I think, Superficially, right? The church, there's a lot of classism within the church. There's a lot of privilege. There's a lot of I feel pretty and decorating the world rather than changing it. There's a lot of judgment towards people whom, as Baby says so eloquently to her father, you wanted me to give everyone a chance, but you mean people who are just like you, right? That's, I think, where the church gets into trouble, is that we are looking to help people, to save people who are just like us. And if they are not like us, outwardly or internally, then we are judging them as cast-offs, that just like the daddy, Dr. Houseman, judged Johnny Castle, and what I find is so incredible about that particular relationship is that Johnny is not the one to correct him. It's Robbie who is, bragging about his relationship with Penny, and he's the one that spills it. And so I so admire that Johnny's integrity was such that I'm going to allow you to maintain that judgment of me, and I'm not going to correct it because it's not my job to correct it. And you're going to think what you want to think anyway. But it is so, what's the word, satisfying as the viewer that it's actually Robbie who makes the misstep in the end. So, but yeah, I think the church is looking to save and help and nurture and recruit people that looks just like it.
I think the church thrives on conflict as well. And it thrives on the classist conflict. I've worked in food service and I've worked in entertainment. And you know what? I would smoke cigarettes behind the building as a waiter with the entertainment, or as the entertainer with the waiters. Because we were all making next to no money doing all of the schlepping work. And the beginning where it's, like, okay, well, waiters, if you need to, go to town on these girls, do it. But you guys are trash. What they should have said is, all of us are here at the whims of an employer. Let's take this over and kill Max.
Yeah.
I'm kidding, but the church will say, okay, I'm at a small to medium-sized congregation. Well, thank God we're not a small congregation. And thank God we have more resources than that. And what we really want to be is a mega church. Because where our failings are is we want to be and it's not actually what Riverside, it's not a direct thing of what has been expressed, but we're always not looking at who we are, and we're certainly not saying, how do we help the smaller churches thrive? It's when we have 10,000 members, like our parking lot fits 80 cars. We're not going to need to have more than 300 members unless we want to move away from the river and be one of those churches that's named like Fifth Avenue Church and it's out on 500th Avenue. But I digress. Neil and Robbie are the two worst characters in any movie ever made. I hate them so much. When he pulled out the fountainhead, I was like, please put the fountainhead into the pitcher of water. What notes were in the margin? Like, feed poor people to dogs? Like, what is he gonna? Okay, sorry. Question. The fountainhead, anti-Christian or anti-Christ? I don't know. I don't need to.
Yeah, that's that's your y'all need to put that on the docket for your podcast docket. The Ayn Rand.
Nope. And for the one person who I know listens to the show and always threatens to do the episodes where I'm like, I will not do it. Don't you even dare. Do not send an email. Do not try to get Spiff on board with this.
I'm not doing a Fountainhead episode, please.
Okay.
Please.
I love it. I love it. But it's just, the arrogance of Robbie and I'm the waiters and the entertainment. And, it's interesting, Arthur, that you said, that relationship between the two forces of labor that are running the hotel, right? Well, you would think that they would join forces together and overthrow Max or Neil or what have you, or know their value at the very least. But it is this weird competition between the two of them. And the fact that Max says, oh, I hire the Yale boys and the Harvard boys to be my waiters. They're the front facing, of the, I almost said Mountain Lake, but it's because it's a real place. But it's like it's so frustrating, right? He is so frustrating as a character, but that's the one thing I also love about this script is that the tension is in every scene. There's not a single scene where there isn't some kind of classist or underlying relationship tension between the characters, which is the mark of a brilliant story, right?
I will admit this. I watched this movie for the first time in 23 years with my husband in bed last night. One, I was always convinced, still kind of am, that Johnny is gay. Like, he's passionate and he's trying to figure himself out, but he's probably a friend of
I have a note on that too.
Yeah. Two,
Yeah, I wouldn't take it off the table. Yeah.
well, and I mean, okay, it's the 60s. Like, what are you going to do? But two, it's the sometimes, like, you know, when Robbie comes up and he's like, I've slummed too. I
Right.
laughed at that line initially, and the more I've thought about it, like this morning, it was, he is so unaware of his privilege that he sees no problem with saying that in front of the woman he quote unquote slummed with. And I
Mhm.
don't know, this was a wake-up call to my own privilege. Spiff, I'm talking so far too much. I shouldn't have
No,
done
you're not. I'm loving this. I mean, I have all the same notes, you know. I was like, one of my notes that I wrote to myself was just like, when did the ballroom dancers stop becoming the tough guys?
Yes.
Well,
Because I think it's
actually-
such an interesting dynamic of use of, like, you know, what it means to be like masculine, what it means, you know, like how has toxic masculinity, for lack of a better, like, you know, kind of expansive term, today influence how we see it, and what was not there when it was being written and performed that allows this to be believable, that allows for the understanding of, like, that's who these people are. Like, Johnny's a tough guy, right? Like, and also for us to be like, and he's probably queer a little bit, and he's a sex worker, and like,
Right.
Yeah, can we talk about, like, Johnny Castle is a sex worker, please?
Let's do it.
And it's
Mhm.
totally fine.
Yes.
Just kind of expected. Also, did the I forget her name, the older woman whose husband gambles all the time.
Vivian, Bungalow Bunny.
Yeah, did Vivian's husband know? Was he paying Johnny to sleep with his wife?
I think he is. Spiff, what do you think?
I think he is too. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. When I watched that, that's what tipped me off to him being a sex worker.
Right.
It is not just because at the beginning it's just like, sleep with whoever you want, you know, do the thing. It's like, we've all been to camp or know the camp stories where there's just a lot of mingling, for lack of a better term. But like, it's like, no, here's money, right? Like, it's the money that makes it more, and that Johnny isn't like, what is this? It's like, he has to mull it over, which means it's not the first time. And also, she calls him lover at the, you know, like at the end, it's just like, hey, lover, it's our last night. This is what I have planned. It makes me think, has he been doing this all summer to her? You know, like,
Well, they put diamonds in his pockets.
well,
Yes.
and so it's like, you know, and it's expected. It's part of the culture that sex work is part of their understanding of exploited labor in their community, without naming it as such, as like that's not what they have an issue with. They have an issue with that he is like the performer, not that he is the sexual performer in hindsight.
Well, and it comes to exploitation, where, you know, like, redlining historically has been detrimental to the labor movement as well, because if your neighbors are all the same race as you, you never build relationships outside of work, and therefore it's easier to create division. The waiters, I don't think, lived with the dancers. Also, I knew this would be a fun interview. I did not expect it to have this kind of serious vibe that we've, like, downshifted into. And I'm completely okay with it. I am in fact having the time of my life, but I do need you guys to do me one favor. Okay.
Okay.
I need somebody to ask me how I got in here.
How'd you get in there, author?
I brought watermelon. Dum dum. I was gonna buy an actual watermelon, but I couldn't. We have
You carried a watermelon.
But that's a question I have. What is the church's watermelon today? What is the thing that we need to start extending to people to say, here's the invitation to come with?
I vouch for this person because they carried a watermelon.
Which is
right.
Like, yeah, it's like, you have helped, you have buy-in now, right? But like,
this is all for yours.
This, but food has always been for me as a sign of, you know, the beloved community. And I love that it starts with that watermelon, that there is and here's a twofold question, right? Because he answered the watermelon and says, can you keep a secret?
Right.
So what secrets are we keeping about the invitations that we extend to people in our communities?
That's so well said. And what I love too is that, we've just landed on Billy, and we haven't talked about Billy yet. And Billy kind of bridges both worlds, right? And so he can also be a metaphor for the church, because he's tied to Johnny. He's Johnny's cousin, but you notice that he's in the opening scene with Max. Max trusts Billy to, carry in the houseman's luggage. The demonstration, the showing in those opening scenes are that the Housemans are very important guests. They're VIPs. We don't see Neil anywhere, right? And even though Billy's considered the help, he's a front-facing person for Max, even though he's not a Harvard or a Yale or a waiter. He's not a Robbie. And so there's some arguments that have circulated for decades that actually Baby and Billy are a better match than Johnny and Baby. And so it's interesting to think of him as a bridge character. And then he literally hands her the watermelon, she hands it back, and then she carries it for him. So I like that, Spiff, you took a literal idea of food. And then I always think about vulnerability. Billy is kind of willing to be vulnerable with Baby, and Baby in turn is willing to step into her own vulnerability when they cross the threshold literally into the building. And then story-wise, she's crossing the threshold from the ordinary world, her world, into this call to adventure. And so he's a great, what would be a guide, he's a guru of sorts, leading her into this new experience.
But does she get caught off on, and I, again, we're influenced for what, but is Johnny influencer culture, right? Did she leave the person that she is kind of supposed to be with? It makes sense that the person that invites you is the person that you kind of navigate a new world with, right? It would make sense for her to stay with Neil and say, okay, what is this? Oh my gosh, look at all this dirty dancing, right? And what's happening? And he's given the invitation. Here's the watermelon. Come be a part of this community, but also I'm trusting you. And there's reciprocity there. But the minute she sees Johnny, and we all know those people who go to churches for that pastor.
Yes.
Or
yes. The charismatic,
I moved to a new place, but my church is online because that's where I go. I stick with the Joel Osteens and I stick with the whatever because it's engaging. I like being pastored to by the front man, right? Or whatever that looks like. And yet her spiritual care would probably be a little bit more tenderly held by Neil in that beginning.
Yes, or by Billy. Yes.
Exactly. Sorry, by Billy. And what does that look like for those of us doing this work today, who are doing the faithful, who are trying to say, journey with me and Jesus, right? Because this is where we're going.
But Johnny is Jesus in this metaphor, and we're missing. No, he's the liberator. He's the Lord of the dance.
Right,
exactly. RJC, he is a Christ figure. He even dies and returns. Right, but she immediately falls in love with Johnny.
Yeah.
If we're doing this metaphorically correct, yes, Johnny absolutely loves her into loving herself, and she can't live her life not feeling that love that she has for him. I also think at the end of the movie, she ends up with Billy because Johnny has to go. Johnny has to go to the next place he's supposed to be.
And Johnny, and he names that she helped him find himself, right? That's why I think this movie is about falling in love with yourself, because at the end, Johnny's she makes me want to be better.
Yes, that's interesting. I had not thought about her ending, off the page with Billy, but that's a really good point. And, and we haven't even talked about the fact too, that, Johnny treats her kind of like a dog for the first 3/4 of the movie. It's not into that vulnerability of them being in the bed together in his cabin, where he's sharing, the testimonial, if you will, about feeling used from, being a sex worker. And, he is all of a sudden vulnerable, right? And so, but the treatment of her in those first, that tense back and forth is, it kind of gets overlooked. And so I'm curious what you two think about that too.
Well, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off either, but because it's this scene, I wanted, this scene was kind of everything to me. The friend, I wrote a note. I was like, oh, she's asking about her own sexual health as an independent, wonderful woman. How many women have you, been with is her question. And he gaslights her. And he's like, no, that's not who I am. And then realizes that there is a connection there, and the vulnerability that is expected when faithful connection happens, offered truth in that moment, and then you get the real Johnny. But I was so mad at him for gaslighting her, for owning her own sexual health and being like, what is happening? Like, so that was me being like, oh, because he's terrible. That is so messed up.
It is. It is. Yeah. And like thinking about gender roles and norms. And we aren't given the information as to whether this is her first sexual experience. We don't really get that information. So we don't know. But
that it's irrelevant to the story that she is a rising freshman in college. And it does not, she's not defined as a virgin, which breaks the Madonna dichotomy.
It does. It does.
That we're allowed to have pleasurable sex and own our own body and talk about at whatever age feels right and healthy.
Going back to the sister conversation at night,
Lisa,
where Lisa's like, I think tonight's the night I'm going to go all the way. Baby never has to have that conversation because there is trust and there's vulnerability and there's passion. The best advice I was ever given was when I was 13 years old and somebody said, virginity doesn't exist, your heart does. You do not have virginity to give. You do not have virginity to be taken. You only have yourself.
Wow.
And that just reminded me of that. And of course, it was right after seeing Dirty Dancing. So I like to think that helped sexually educate me.
Oh my goodness. What are the odds?
It did help me understand that I really like Patrick Swayze's like chest. Like I don't need like super ripped. He's just in phenomenal shape.
And phenomenal. Yes.
He moves. There's something just about the way he moves, that it's not necessarily your body, but it's about how you move through this world that's actually very sexy.
It is. It is. Yes. Agreed.
In that dinner jacket, when he was the first dance he does at the resort, like
yeah.
Yeah.
For those of you listening, we all just had a momentary thought about Patrick Swayze.
We were
rest in peace, buddy.
2009.
Yes, we were going in the movies were rolling in our heads. Yes, agreed. I'll never forget as a child, I used to watch this movie with my cousins. Shout out to Aaron and Brittany, who are, if they're not listening now, they're going to listen later. And we would watch, this is the 90s, early 90s. And when he does, the two of them are sort of at a gray background maybe, and he's doing like this little shimmy like with his rib cage, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, like I don't think I had ever seen a person's body move that fluidly and beautifully, wherein you could see their actual like muscle strains, like the tone of their muscles. I mean, it was just incredible. And I think too, like that's another indication Vivian wants Johnny for his body, right? And so but Johnny is doing something really amazing with his body. He's bringing joy to the people who are watching him dance. He has a connection with Penny via his body and their dancing. Ultimately, he has a connection with Baby and, via their bodies. And so this movie does have a lot of like body theology in it when we start to peel off the layers of the onion. So.
And the language of Baby, I think, as a through line from both abortion and the liberating of understanding of who she is. Like it's this kind of dichotomy of like, what does it actually mean? The politics of identity, what does it really mean to own your body? One for, what is his dancing partner's name?
Penny.
Thank you. I was like, you just said it. What Penny's body and the baby that would come from what is happening in her body, that there is Baby there, and there is like the through line of Baby saving her with the money and then Baby liberating into herself. That just that word has carried so many layers to this film, of one that is like comprehensive healthcare and and who are we in our own skin, and who are we in community, and who are we at the end of the day when we take off the showcase dress, when we take off the nickname, when who are we in our vulnerable moments with those we trust.
Oh, that's beautifully said. And speaking of Penny too, you mentioned this really powerful through line, which I had not thought about with Baby. And see, that's another layer that I'm going to look at it differently when I watch the movie again. But, can we talk about how wise Penny is as a character too? And, she counsels Johnny. She has a very tender relationship with Dr. Houseman. I mean, you notice that he doesn't offer, at least not that we see, judgment. I mean, he says, you can't hang out with these people, but I think he's more thinking about Johnny, right? Because he's thinking about the male who implicated Penny, so he's got a very tender connection with Penny. He checks on her, and she feels it very tenderly towards him. And then Penny counsels Johnny later when he gets involved with Baby. And so, yeah, just Penny's wisdom. I mean, not when it comes to Robbie, but I think she thought that situation was going to turn out differently, which is also, something that happens to everybody in our lives at some point.
When we don't have access to adequate health care, we don't get to make responsible decisions. And sometimes the things that happen to us are not even of our own doing.
And if you need an abortion, you should probably think that it should be safe, legal, and rare, because people will not stop getting abortions if they are outlawed. They will only go to extremes like backroom doors with folding chairs and however it was described in the
dirty knives. Yep.
Yeah. And Penny, Penny is the unsung hero of this entire movie for me. I love her. I love what she brings. Especially as a woman who is, Dana, as you said, she is tender and she is intimate and she is vulnerable with these men, and they are not her partners. They are her partner. They are not her spouse partners, right? They're her dance partners. They are her friends. And I think we have gotten culturally, and the church has a lot to do with this, that you have one partner in this life, right? You have one partner of intimacy in this life. And that's just not true. The people that we are intimate with, and what intimacy looks like in lots of different ways, needs to be celebrated and named in the church so that we start to name and value it in society. Because if not, then you put all your trust in this one person, and that's okay sometimes, but you're a whole person with different manifestations of who you are in different spaces, and there's going to be different needs and different levels of vulnerability and all the things that come with that, about being a part of a beloved community. And so if we don't start naming that at from the pulpit, to say I identify as a straight woman, unpartnered right now, and yet I have intimate, vulnerable relationships with my female friends who know things about me that my sexual partners or my boyfriends have never known, or for lots of different reasons, or have known in different ways. And so how do we as the church, or as faith leaders, as professors and things like that, help open that space up so that we start to understand the beloved community as many spaces of vulnerability?
Very well said. Very well said. Do you think, Penny is who? Well, let me ask you this. This is not a leading question. Let me reframe it. Who do you think is, who's your favorite character? I was going to say, who do you think is the wisest character, or what character speaks the most to you? But yeah, we could just land there. Whom do you resonate most with, for whatever reason?
Arthur?
I like Wayne Knight's. I'm kidding. He's awful.
Now but he got his start. I mean, this was his breakout role.
Really? That's how? Okay. That makes me like him more. But it's just I am going to go for Penny because of wisdom, and I'm changing my final answer because Penny was wisdom in my final answer. But I am going to go with Wayne Knight because he is no, I'm not going to say he's my favorite character is Baby.
Baby.
Good. I wish we all had rehearsal bridges.
I know. Oh yes. That's awesome. Me too.
Yeah, Dana, who's your favorite?
Oh gosh, it's usually Johnny. Yeah, so Johnny, I resonate most with Johnny because Johnny describes himself as sort of being from the streets. He's a salt of the earth character. His dad and his uncle are painters and plaster experts, and so he's a working guy, right? And people make assumptions about him. And about his life and what he's about. And yet he's got this beautiful, elegant, bourgeois craft, AKA ballroom dancing, right? That the rich people love. And so I love him because he lives in two different worlds and he can straddle both of those worlds effortlessly, but actually externally, it looks effortless. But on the inside, as we learn more about him as a character, we realize there's an internal conflict.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think I go with Johnny too, and for all the ways in which you just mentioned, and that there is a, like, he deconstructs stereotypes about what it means to be a man, right? He is a caretaker, but like a present one. It is not just about throwing money at a problem. It is about, when Penny is, in the throes of her botched, kind of medical procedure, and he comes in, it's like Johnny's here, like it's a ministry of presence that he offers.
Yes.
But I will name at the end, the person that I keep thinking about is the dad, is Jerry Orbach's character, because I loved, I mean, I love a good old timey, medical bag. I love the idea. I generally travel with a collar, like it just that I can throw on if I need it, but I don't necessarily carry all the things necessary for me to do the tools of my vocation. And I love that he offers that just visual space when she grabs his bag and he has it, that says, like, he is so called to what he does, to healing community, that he travels with the things necessary to equip him to do his work well. He also shows an arc of growth and change that I hope the church embodies.
So, and the very fact that, okay, $250 is a lot of money, except not to her and not to him.
Right. Not to him.
I wish, the one shot I wish they would have had is he just pulls out a wad of cash, peels it off, and hands it to her. Because obviously, like, hey, I'm
a band of cash
resort for 3 weeks and not working. Also, side note, Johnny being like, oh, I'm in a union. It's like, Johnny, you have health care, so shut up.
Good point.
But I get it.
Well done, Arthur.
But he never hesitates to help Penny. He continues to check on her, even though he's furious with Baby about this and will not speak to her. I think I agree with that, Spiff. I really like your answer. I'm just going to take it as my own, but I'm going to credit you for it.
Yes.
Okay, I need to ask a real and true question, if I may.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I have this big long thing about drag shows and semi-professional wrestling, and how those are the best indicators of the table. Like, there's a level of cheesiness to our sacraments. So number one, when Jerry Orbach, because he doesn't have a name aside from Jerry Orbach, when Jerry Orbach is sitting out on the deck, like, it's suddenly not just the end of August, autumn, it's like November. Like, I was like, did Kennedy just get shot? Why is he so sad? Like, it's gray out and there's orange trees and they've changed all the, I kind of love that because they're trying to make us understand something. But the other cheesy part, and I don't mean cheesy in a bad way, when did Johnny have time to teach the choreography for The Last Dance to all of his dance cronies? Because after he takes the leap off the stage in the final number, he goes up there and they're all doing the dance.
They're all doing.
Because he's done it every year. That's
okay.
He has the Last Dance every single year, and so they know. Like, there's it. I jumped on Dana's answer, but
that's
as
right.
a musical theater person, I'm like, listen, I can still do, as we've named that, I have seen Rent the musical, not the movie, because I'm not the biggest fan of the movie. I've seen the actual stage show 40 times. Yes, I can do the entire La Vie Boheme table scene without thinking about it. So if someone jumps on a table and starts doing the Mark part, I will 1000% take my seat at the end and be Maureen. And
I can still shapoopy with the best of them. I get it.
Right. And so, like, and I think that is, I had the same thought, and then I was like, wait a minute, no, these are performers. These are people that know that know not only what Johnny's going to do for this thing, because it's the dance, but also their role in support for it.
Yes. And let's not, forget the FU that Johnny Castle does, because he's doing this dance that presumably he's choreographed. The dancers know it, and it's not the pachanga, right, or whatever it was that Neil wanted. It's something contemporary that Johnny starts, practice. Yeah, oh yes, I hate Neil so much. We all do, right?
Thank you for reading the question that I've been holding up too much.
He's such a tool.
So I have one last question before we go to the final question, if I might. So there's the line at the end again, and maybe this is why I am, sitting here with Daddy, which saying Daddy is so, I call my dad Pop. So like, Daddy is such a,
my kid calls me Pops.
Daddy is such a very specific term in communities that I am an ally to, that I'm just like, it's not what I think of. But anyway, but he does say, you know, when I'm wrong, I say I'm wrong.
Yes.
But he doesn't say he's wrong. Sorry. He needed
Well,
to say I am wrong, but yes, I get it. I'm sorry. Excuse me. I jumped in. I didn't. I shouldn't have done
no,
that.
but going off of that ethic, what does the church need to name that it is wrong about? What do we need to say? I am, and I'm gonna ask us, maybe let's pick one, because I'm sure we could all list the lists. But if the church were to keep that ethic, which I hope we do, or as faith leaders, you know, keep that ethic of, I've said this often, like in my work of allyship and justice, the most powerful thing I can often say is I'm sorry, you know, because we don't say it enough or authentically or well. And naming our, you know, our sinfulness and our brokenness in the midst of community. But what does the church need to say I'm wrong about?
Wow. Well, you landed on it, Spiff, too, when you said ethic. You know, we haven't addressed this yet, but thinking about Jerry Orbach, who comes from on the paternal side, a Jewish family, you know, Eleanor Bergstein, who's also Jewish, Jennifer Gray, who has a Jewish father. I mean, this is a tip of the hat to Tikkun Olam, if I've ever, you know, heard of one throughout this whole entire movie. But, you know, what the church does wrong is exactly what Baby tells Jerry Orbach, you know, Daddy. She says, you know, you told me that everybody deserves a chance, but you meant that only if they are just like you. And so that is what the church thinks. The church thinks that it should be comprised of people who are just like it, you know, and that's where we get it wrong. That's where we get it wrong.
I think your answer embodies all of the lists, or all of the subdivisions in it, because it's we want women to be like men, we want queers to be like straights, we want people of color to worship a white Jesus. I think that's in there. I will specifically say women, because I'll say this: Dirty Dancing is quote unquote a chick flick. I started reading quote unquote chick lit because I realized I'd been avoiding Jane Austen and the Bronte sisters for decades, and I enjoy it. It's fun, it's thoughtful, it's intelligent. What does, and it plays into toxic masculinity to have this kind of thing, but specifically the church has to become egalitarian when it comes to gender and sexual, not orientation, but gender roles and normativity, whatever that may be, in my opinion. That's a good question.
Very well said.
I think so. I also will name that I watched the movies that shaped us, or whatever that thing is on Netflix. And I loved that they were like, we got the right director because he knew when to keep the camera rolling, even when we were done with the script. And we got so many beautiful moments in this that are in this movie because of that. And so I think one of the things that the church needs to both recognize and realign and apologize for is for putting the value and the emphasis on what is happening on the stage, right? Like, how many beautiful holy moments are we missing because we haven't let the camera keep rolling, or we haven't valued the B-roll film? And that is, you know, because the ministry that is happening beyond the sermons, beyond the, you know, the immediate table, beyond, you know, as disciples, that's the crux of our worship experience. And so the ministry that is happening when the person in the back who doesn't want to talk to anyone, but is, you know, thanked for coming when they leave, or when, you know, someone has a gluten allergy and you change the bread to be inclusive of everybody, and all the little ministry things that are the B-roll of ministry. We need to, capitalism has said this is the words on the page, and, you know, what's on the main stage is what matters. And I think that that's a real, it's really sinful of us as a collective body trying to do the just work of God.
Amen. Amen.
I really missed you, Spiff. We have for our final question, and you get to ask it, Spiff, because you know.
Okay. Because I know it. Dana, this has been, I mean, like I said, I did not know I needed this, and I did. This has been such a joy.
Wait.
Good.
Have you had the time of your life, Spiff?
I I have had the time of my life, and I've never felt like this before.
Yay!
Yay! Tana, thank you again. We hope you will come back. I know we've talked about it, but for our deuces out there, that's it's on the table. Yes. But what biblical story, theme, book are you most reminded, etc. Are you most reminded of in Dirty Dancing?
Matthew 7, without a doubt. So if we get, if we head down to the, beginning, what y'all know the Bible way better than I do, but like it'd be verse 13 or 14, where we're talking about, Jesus is giving the proclamation to anyone who has the ears to hear that, you are not to judge others, unless you're going to be judged. And then he just like starts, spouting off about just being plain old nasty. And he's like, I'm paraphrasing obviously, but he's like, it's not where it's at, folks. And then he lands on the golden rule. And so I feel like, in Matthew 7, Jesus takes all of the teachings of Judaism, all of the teachings that he has as a reformer, and just brings them all together in a tidy package. And just, here you go, friends. This is what it's all about, right? And so I love that, because I feel like that's what this movie does. There's a lot to think through and hear. And this is our Matthew 7.
I always love Hillel's version of the golden rule more than Jesus's, which is do not do to another which you find aberrant. That is the sum of the law and the prophets. The rest is commentary. I'm going to go because I've been dying for this. I was going to say Penny is wisdom, and Penny is wisdom. And I was going to say Johnny is Jesus, but I didn't actually mean it. But the parable of the wedding banquet, in which people are too busy, and or in the other telling, they won't put on the outfits. They don't want to do the dance. Max Kellerman is the parable of the wedding banquet, because I did not remember that conversation when I saw this movie last. And when he said times are changing and kids don't want this, and you finally see like that control just let go a little bit. And at the end of the movie, Brian turned to me and he said, imagine what the world would be like if people were just willing to dance every now and again. And so that scene at the end became the wedding banquet for me. And I don't dance enough, but that's neither here nor there.
I love that. I thought too about like, what does it mean for the simplicity of dance to be what brings us joy, right? We're so into like, do the streamers, do the things, make everyone happy, like all the things. And like, what if all it took was just like everyone dance? Right. That is not my answer, but so I'm gonna go, and I came up with this answer before we had obviously this conversation, but I think it still fits. I think I'm gonna go with Johnny and Baby as a couple, as Akilah and Priscilla.
Ooh.
As those that both work and spoil, as those that both proclaim and move and deconstruct, who are both known apart but are better together. That is my answer.
I love it.
Wow.
I usually put up a screen at this point that says jeffwonroe.com celebrating 16 years of making the ordinary time extraordinary. But for some odd reason, whenever I load that picture on my computer, it's just a black screen. So I'm just going to say out loud, jeffwonroe.com leads you to our sponsor, Jeff Wonroe, and he is marvelous. And I will get that fixed for next week, Jeff. Yes. Dana, Trent, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank y'all.
Book coming out, Dessert First. It is in my Amazon cart. Oh, sorry, it is in my secret, don't say the name of it, cart.
Oh, yes.
You know what? I'm going to take it out of my cart. I'm going to order it from my local independent bookseller is what I'm going to do.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
And
yes,
we're thrilled to have had you here. Hey, Spiff, next week, we're going to be back.
We are. And we're going to tell people with what next. But keep on the list. You know what? This is a great opportunity to say, y'all, smash that button, subscribe, like, share, do all the things, because that is how we tell you what is coming up next. We have great guests that are lined up. If you want to be a guest, reach out to us. If you know someone that you think would be a good guest, put us all in touch. I do know we have Alexis Carter Thomas coming, who is exceptional and one of my dearest friends, and y'all are doing Brandy Carlisle, which speaks, I mean, we're going to talk Wild Horses because that book is incredible. I will also name, I just went and saw Brandy 2 weeks ago. So Alexis and I went and saw Brandy. So that is how she is kind of come here, and we're going to talk all things Brandy. We are working on just a whole slew of really incredible
We
guests.
don't announce until it's confirmed. And we're so close to confirmation on so many things. Dana, I hope you'll come back for Hocus Pocus. I just
would
want to note
love
this
to.
in our correspondence. Dana put in there, she was like, I would totally do Hocus Pocus. Arthur, please don't worry, it's not a horror movie. And I really appreciate that deep consideration for my inability to watch scary things. But anything that has Bette Midler singing I've Got a Spell on You is in my book. This has been 2 on 1. Like, subscribe, share with your friends, share with your enemies. Thank you so much. We'll see you later, deuces.
Thanks for having me, y'all. Take care.